Hey folks, some of you have been wondering where I disappeared to since I haven't posted a video in many months. Well, a lot has happened. While I do have some interesting observation about religion to make, this video is mostly an update of what I've been up to since last spring. I don't have access to my usual recording equipment yet, so I'll have to make do with this iPad. In April of 2021, I got married at the ripe young age of 58. I have never found the thought of marriage appealing, and I've avoided every opportunity in the past, but this time I decided to make an exception. Just this once. My now ex-girlfriend and I decided to spend a month in Europe for our honeymoon. Our main purpose, though, was not sightseeing, but to instead search for a place where we might ultimately like to move. You see, although I really love my California home's unique architecture and beautiful views of Folsom Lake, the summers have become increasingly long and excessively hot, and every year the fire danger increases. So my wife and I decided to become early climate change refugees and move someplace decidedly less flammable. The idea was to find a quaint town or village in a region with a narrow range of temperature extremes and no drought. I speak Spanish reasonably well, so Spain was a logical place to look first. We landed in Barcelona, rented a car, and immediately headed up the Costa Brava. We visited a number of coastal towns, spending the nights in B&Bs we found along the way. The town of Begur appealed to us the most, mainly for its attractive views. We'd had high hopes for Cadaqués, but the town was surprisingly isolated. It was extremely crowded when we were there, and our car could barely squeeze through the streets. So we decided to cut across southern France to visit the Atlantic coast of Spain. While in France, we rather enjoyed visiting Pau, Bayonne, and Biarritz. But we found the Basque country villages close to Spain especially charming, with easy access to both beach and mountains. Definitely a contender for a place to move to, although neither of us speaks enough French yet to make that particularly viable. We headed back into Spain and drove west along the mountainous northern coast. In Bilbao, we took a rare break to sightsee, visiting the Guggenheim Museum. Some fascinating artwork there, but the town itself didn't quite work for us. Farther west, we found our favorite B&B ever, a place we hope to visit again sometime. We randomly wandered into Santiago de Compostela in the far west of Spain, not realizing it's a major religious pilgrimage site. We happened to arrive in time for some interesting entertainment. We then headed south into Portugal. I spent a couple years in Brazil as a child, so I can at least communicate with the Portuguese people. Porto was attractive and interesting, although too urban for our taste. We bypassed Lisbon and explored Cascais. The place is quite beautiful, with remarkably stable and comfortable temperatures, so it also became a contender for a place to land, although unfortunately it can get too touristy in summer. At our B&B there, I was surprised to find a martial arts gym in the backyard run by a Brazilian Muay Thai instructor. I took the opportunity to get in a Thai boxing workout, something I made a video about 8 years ago. So that was some unexpected fun. We then continued south and went all the way down to the Algarve. The place is sunny with some beautiful land and seascapes, yet for some reason it just didn't click for us. Yeah, I know, we're picky. So we headed east and back into Spain. The town of Cádiz has character, although, again, not our style. We also took a day to visit Gibraltar. It too has its charms, but the traffic driving in and out of that place is excruciatingly long and slow, and property is at a premium in such a small place. We worked our way along the southern underside of Spain, visiting the various coastal towns. We had hoped Marbella would strike our fancy, but it turned out to be a bit too touristy for us. Benalmádena was more pleasant to walk through, and we enjoyed some time at the beach. But the whole region is probably not going to fare well with increasing climate change. And with that, our trip was over. However, since my wife is German and we were in Europe, we took a quick flight from Malaga to Luxembourg, then drove to her hometown in Germany. The village is old, really old. It first appeared in historical records in the year 893. But it has decent internet access, and they don't burn witches and atheists there anymore, so it's a rather nice little place. We had never considered moving to Germany, mainly because I'm not a fan of cold, cloudy winters. But the landscape is gorgeous, the villages are quaint, there's easy access to larger towns and cities in Germany, Luxembourg, France, and even Belgium. And suddenly I was part of a large and friendly new family. So why not give it a try? The climate in winter definitely isn't my favorite, but at least cloudy and rainy means the region is a lot less combustible than California. We returned to the US. I immediately arranged to put my house on the market, and we sold most of our belongings and had the rest shipped overseas. The real estate market was still hot, and not just from the fires, so despite smoke marring the view, I sold my place rather quickly. Exactly 2 months after our return to the US, we were flying back to Germany. We immediately got to work establishing residency. That was an interesting process. As the spouse of a German citizen, residency was relatively easy, but it did require me to have at least a basic understanding of German. So I had to take the A1 German test in Bonn, a couple hours away. Fortunately, I had spent a few years learning German online and passed a sample test. I'd started learning German so I could order a surprise hot air balloon ride for my pre-wife on a trip to Germany several years ago. But it turned out the balloon company was in Luxembourg and wanted to communicate in French, so I still needed an interpreter. Anyway, I passed the German test, so that wasn't a problem. What is a problem is that the German I learned was Hochdeutsch, or High German. It's a problem because every region of Germany has its own version of German. In fact, often each village has its own dialect. The little town I moved to has a population of just 1,600, but it also has its own language. I hardly understand a word they're saying unless they slow down and try to speak Hochdeutsch. At least Germans who come here from different regions have almost as much trouble understanding the locals as I do. The next hurdle was getting my health insurance squared away. It's illegal to not have health insurance in Germany, so getting it is a prerequisite for residency. As a German citizen, my wife was automatically enrolled into the excellent public healthcare system. As her spouse, I could also be enrolled at no additional cost. Nice. Except that they required my residency card in order to issue me the health insurance, and I couldn't get the residency card until I had my health insurance. Neither office would budge on that one. They went back and forth on that for quite a while before each finally agreed to issue me a very short-term card, which the other side accepted long enough to move the process forward. You'd think I was the first foreign spouse to try to become a German resident. Anyway, I finally received my healthcare card, only to then receive notification that my income disqualified me from the public healthcare system. Oh, great. They fully admitted they had neglected to take into account my income, even though I'd provided it to them twice, and yet they had the nerve to admonish me for not catching their mistake. What, I'm supposed to know the intricacies of German immigration law better than the experts? Sheesh. So I had to get private health insurance. It's a lot more expensive, but still pretty affordable, and it includes dental, so... Oh, but the fun was just beginning. I also had to deal with my driver's license. You see, Germans take driving very seriously, and when you move to Germany, your US driver's license is only good for 6 months. After that, you need a German driver's license in order to legally drive. Fortunately, 27 US states have a reciprocity agreement with Germany, whereby their driver's licenses can be essentially just traded in for a German license. In addition, there are another 10 US states with almost the same deal. You just have to take the written test. Unfortunately, California isn't part of either agreement. Ah, but wait. It turns out that 4 German states think the whole US state-by-state reciprocity thing is ridiculous, so they simply accept all US driver's licenses. Except that Rheinland-Pfalz, the state where I moved to, isn't one of them. Well, shit, there was no way around it. I had to take the written and practical driving tests. I figured there were a few German driving rules that were different from the US, so I signed up with a local driving school to get in a few lessons before taking the test. But first I was required to take an all-day first aid course. Long ago I became a rescue diver before I became a dive master, so I figured the class would be easy for me. Unfortunately, the instructor had a thick accent and used a dialect from another region of Germany, which meant I understood all of about 3 words he said. Still, by asking a few relevant questions and nodding periodically, I made it through the day and received my certificate. Phew. The next step was to take the written test. Fortunately, they give you the option of taking the test in English, a language with which I'm a bit more familiar. Unfortunately, the test questions are drawn from a pool of over 1,100 questions, and a lot of them fall somewhere between tricky and, oh, what fresh hell is this, hard. As you know, I don't believe in God, but some of the questions got me thinking that maybe Satan exists after all. Here's an example. You are driving at 100 kilometers per hour on a road not outside a built-up area. In front of you is a truck traveling at 70 kilometers per hour. What is the minimum distance you must be from a crest in the road when commencing an overtaking maneuver? The answer is 800 meters. And here is the explanation they provide for determining that answer. Overtaking distance equals the speed of your own vehicle, 100, divided by the difference speed, 100 minus 70 equals 30, multiplied by the sum of the two 2-second safety distances and the length of both vehicles, 50 meters plus 50 meters plus approximately 4.5 plus 15.5 meters. This results in an overtaking distance of 400 meters. Due to the dome, the path has to be doubled, resulting in the 800 meters. Got that? Isn't that the kind of calculation you want to make during a split-second passing decision? Well, I memorized all the questions and their answers over the course of a couple of weeks, and passed the test with only 2 mistakes. I'm not going to say the test was hard, but after I was done, they handed me a degree in mathematics. Alas, I had to sell my Suzuki Hayabusa before moving to Germany, and I'm thinking about buying a Carver 1 to replace it. The Carver is a weird, unholy union between a motorcycle and a car that uses a manual shifter, and in Germany you're not allowed to drive a car with a stick shift unless you take your driving test with one. So I chose to do my lessons in a manual VW Golf. I figured it would be relatively easy, since I'm comfortable with a manual transmission, and I'd been driving an excessively large Volvo SUV in Germany's narrow streets for a couple of months without killing anyone. Well, it wasn't so easy. I made mistake after mistake right from the beginning. I found I had to unlearn a lifetime of automatic driving skills that are significantly different in Germany. Like, intersecting roads on the right have the right-of-way unless otherwise indicated, and in slow traffic you have to maintain an open lane down the middle of the road for emergency vehicles. And a green traffic light and a stop sign together means ignore the stop sign, and you aren't allowed to use guns when expressing road rage. It was especially galling that my instructor was younger than me and likely had been driving for less time than I had, yet I felt like an awkward teenager with every lesson. I ended up taking 6 hours of driving lessons, making mistakes that would have failed the test every single day. I wasn't very optimistic about passing, but I pulled it all together on test day and only made a couple minor mistakes. And upon the test's completion, they immediately handed me my license. The whole driver's license acquisition cost me about 4 weeks and €1,000, which is a lot less than most Germans have to deal with. I'm still dealing with the PTSD, but I'll get over it. Anyway, I've been in Germany for over 4 months, and I have my residency permit, health insurance, and driver's license. Yay! The next step will probably be to buy a house. But right now I'm waiting for our shipment to arrive, which will likely be around mid-March. Then I'll have access to my proper recording equipment and can hopefully get back to making better videos. In the meantime, here's a bit of irony for you. I moved away from the most religious country in the developed world to a nation with double the number of convinced atheists, yet the house where I'm temporarily living has a bunch of religious symbols hanging on the walls. Additionally, every village has its own church, mine has two, and there are little chapels, wayside shrines, and religious symbols all over the place. Church bells ring at least 3 times a day, every day, and they ring at least 15 minutes straight when someone in town dies. But while people here often use religious phrases, like Gott sei Dank, which literally means to God be the thanks, there's none of that in-your-face, crass, evangelical Christianity here, or at least I've seen no hints of it in this area. People tend to keep their religious beliefs to themselves, which I appreciate. If religious people in the US were as considerate, my channel wouldn't need to exist. Meanwhile, Christianity in Germany continues its rapid decline. In 2019, over 500,000 Christians deconverted. That's quite impressive, considering the population of Germany is just 83 million. Compare that to the US, which is losing twice as many Christians per year, but has a population almost 4 times larger. Consequently, there has been an avalanche of church closings in Germany over the past couple of decades. Many churches have been bought and converted into apartment buildings, schools, theaters, music clubs, even places of worship for non-Christian religions. But it's often a tough sell, because heating rooms with 10-meter-high ceilings is prohibitively expensive, as is constructing additional floors to fill up all that space. So now many of the churches are simply being demolished, up to 2/3 of them in some towns. Christianity has lost its power to force people to convert by threatening them with torture and death. Sex and corruption scandals that have plagued churches throughout history are finally being exposed and reckoned with. And church doctrines of intolerance, misogyny, homophobia, anti-science, etc. are becoming less and less relevant or acceptable to more enlightened modern morality. So unless those dominations change their ways, they will continue to lose power and hemorrhage followers. And I'm pretty sure Germany will continue to be among the nations on the crest of that wave. But don't make the mistake of thinking that all Germans are rational thinkers. Germany has enough anti-vaxxers, anti-maskers, COVID denialists, and conspiracy theorists to be annoying, although at least they're relatively few in number. I'm frankly more concerned about freezing my ass off when I go running on cold, dark winter mornings than I am of running into deeply misinformed protesters. And there you go. That's my update. See you later.